Hey everyone, welcome back to our chapter book read-along of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. We are on chapter 15 out of 17 chapters. We're getting to the end of this magical story, and I can't wait to see what happens next with you all. So, if you are watching this with somebody, pause the video and do a quick review of some main points that you remember of the book so far. If you can't remember all of them, that's okay. Just shout out your favorite ones. Here goes my quick review. We're going to go as fast as we can so that we can get to the story. Are you ready? Harry Potter is the boy who lived. He survived being attacked by an evil, dark wizard named Voldemort when he was just a baby. Sadly, his parents passed away, but he lived with his aunt and uncle and cousin, the Dursleys. They were not nice people, nor were they magical. They were muggles. Harry learned on his 11th birthday that he is a wizard. He got his letter to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, went with Hagrid to the Gringotts Wizard Bank and Diagon Alley, and then onto the Hogwarts Express to go to school. He met a few friends. Harry met Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, and then learned all about how to become a wizard. So, he also joined the Quidditch team and has learned a couple other things while at Hogwarts. They accidentally ran into a three-headed dog that Hagrid named Fluffy, who is guarding something that was made by Nicholas Flamel. Harry, Ron, and Hermione did a little digging and learned that Nicholas Flamel made the Sorcerer's Stone, which can create the elixir of life, which helps you live forever. It can also turn things into gold, which is pretty cool. So, they believe that their teacher, Professor Snape, is trying to steal it. He let in a troll to distract people to get past the dog, and also is trying to ask the teachers about their certain things that they have put in place to get past as well. Now, we just finished off our last chapter where Harry, Ron, and Hermione were helping Hagrid out. Hagrid had, started to raise a dragon, which, 1, is illegal, 2, not a good idea. So, Harry and Hermione took the dragon up to the tallest tower and helped it get away. But as they climbed down the stairs, they forgot the invisibility cloak, which Harry had received at Christmas from a mysterious person. It was his father's. Well, they forgot the invisibility cloak. They were caught by Filch, the caretaker. Now we'll see what Harry and Hermione get into after that. Let's go read chapter 15, The Forbidden Forest. Enjoy! Chapter 15, The Forbidden Forest. Things couldn't have been worse. Filch took them down to Professor McGonagall's study on the first floor, where they sat and waited without saying a word to each other. Hermione was trembling. Excuses, alibis, and wild cover-up stories chased each other around Harry's brain, each more feeble than the last. He couldn't see how they were going to get out of trouble this time. They were cornered. How could they have been so stupid as to forget the cloak? There was no reason on earth that Professor McGonagall would accept for their being out of bed and creeping around the school in the dead of night, let alone being up on the tallest astronomy tower, which was out of bounds except for the classes. Add Norbert and the invisibility cloak, and they might as well be packing their bags already. Had Harry thought that things couldn't have been worse? He was wrong. When Professor McGonagall appeared, she was leading Neville. "Harry!" Neville burst out the moment he saw the other two. "I was trying to find you and warn you. I heard Malfoy saying he was going to catch you. He said you had a Harry shook his head violently to shut Neville up, but Professor McGonagall had seen. She looked more likely to breathe fire than Norbert as she towered over the three of them. I would never have believed it if any of you I would never have believed it of any of you. Mr. Filch says you are up on the astronomy tower. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Explain yourselves. It was the first time Hermione had ever failed to answer a teacher's question. She was staring at her slippers, as still as a statue. I think I've got a good idea of what's been going on, said Professor McGonagall. It doesn't take a genius to work it out. You fed Draco Malfoy some cock and bull story about a dragon, trying to get him out of bed and into trouble. I've already caught him. I suppose you think it's funny that Longbottom here heard the story and believed it too? Harry caught Neville's eye and tried to tell him without words that this wasn't true, because Neville was looking stunned and hurt. Poor blundering Neville. Harry knew what it must have cost him to try and find them in the dark to warn them. I'm disgusted, said Professor McGonagall. 4 students out of bed in one night. I've never heard such a thing before. You, Miss Granger, I thought you had more sense. As for you, Mr. Potter, I thought Gryffindor meant more to you than this. All 3 of you will receive detentions. Yes, you too, Mr. Longbottom. Nothing gives you the right to walk around the school at night, especially these days. It's very dangerous. And 50 points will be taken from Gryffindor. 50? Harry gasped. They would lose the lead he'd won in the last Quidditch match. 50 points each, said Professor McGonagall, breathing heavily through her long pointed nose. Professor, please! You can't! Don't tell me what I can't do, Potter! Now, get back to bed, all of you. I've never been more ashamed of Gryffindor students. 150 points lost. That put Gryffindor in last place. In one night, they'd ruined any chance Gryffindor had for the House Cup. Harry felt as though the bottom had dropped out of his stomach. How could he ever make up for this? Harry didn't sleep all night. He could hear Neville sobbing into his pillow for what seemed like hours. Harry couldn't think of anything to say to comfort him. He knew Neville, like himself, was dreading the dawn. What would happen when the rest of Gryffindor found out what they'd done? At first, Gryffindors passing the giant hourglass that recorded the house points the next day thought there had been a mistake. How could they suddenly have 150 points fewer than yesterday? And then the story started to spread. Harry Potter, the famous Harry Potter, their hero of 2 Quidditch matches, had lost them all these points. Him and a couple of other stupid first years. From being one of the most popular and admired people at school, Harry was suddenly the most hated. Even Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs turned on him, because everyone had been longing to see Slytherin lose the House Cup. Everywhere Harry went, people pointed and didn't trouble lowering their voices as they insulted him. Slytherins, on the other hand, clapped as he walked past them, whistling and cheering. Thanks, Potter, we owe you one. Only Ron stood by him. They'll all forget this in the next weeks. Fred and George have lost loads of points in all the time they've been here, and people still like them. They've never lost 150 points in one go, though, have they? Said Harry miserably. Well, no, Ron admitted. It was a bit late to repair the damage, but Harry swore to himself not to meddle in things that weren't his business from now on. He'd had it with sneaking around and spying. He felt so ashamed of himself that he went to Wood and offered to resign from the Quidditch team. Resign? Wood thundered. What good'll that do? How are we going to get any points back if you can't win at Quidditch? But even Quidditch had lost its fun. The rest of the team wouldn't speak to Harry during practice, and if they had to speak about him, they called him the Seeker. Hermione and Neville were suffering too. They didn't have as bad a time as Harry because they weren't as well known, but nobody would speak to them either. Hermione had stopped drawing attention to herself in class, keeping her head down and working in silence. Harry was almost glad the exams weren't far away. All the revision he had to do kept his mind off his misery. He, Ron, and Hermione kept to themselves, working late into the night, trying to remember the ingredients in complicated potions, learn charms and spells off by heart, memorize the dates of magical discoveries and goblin rebellions. Then, about a week before the exams were due to start, Harry's new resolution not to interfere in anything that didn't concern him was put to an unexpected test. Walking back from the library on his own one afternoon, he heard somebody whimpering in the classroom up ahead. As he drew closer, he heard Quirrell's voice. No, not again, please." It sounded as though someone was threatening him. Harry moved closer. All right, he heard Quirrell sob. Next second, Quirrell came hurrying out of the classroom, straightening his turban. He was pale and looked as though he was about to cry. He strode out of sight. Harry didn't think Quirrell had even noticed him. He waited until Quirrell's footsteps had disappeared, then peered into the classroom. It was empty, but a door stood ajar at the other end. Harry was halfway towards it before he remembered what he'd promised himself about not meddling. All the same, he'd have gambled 12 Sorcerer's Stones that Snape had just left the room, and from what Harry had just heard, Snape would be walking with a new spring in his step. Quirrell seemed to have given in at last. Harry went back to the library, where Hermione was testing Ron on astronomy. Harry told them what he'd heard. "Snape's done it then," said Ron. "If Quirrell's taught him how to break the anti-dark force spell." "There's still Fluffy, though," said Hermione. "Maybe Snape has found out how to get past him without asking Hagrid," said Ron, looking up at the thousands of books surrounding him. "I bet there's a book somewhere in here telling you how to get past a giant three-headed dog. So what do we do, Harry?" The light of adventure was kindling again in Ron's eyes, but Hermione answered Harry before we could. "Go to Dumbledore. That's what we should have done ages ago. If we try anything ourselves, we'd be thrown out for sure." "But we've got no proof," said Harry. "Quirrell's too scared to back it up. Snape's only got to say he doesn't know how the troll got past on Halloween and that he was nowhere near the third floor. Who do you think they'll believe, him or us? It's not exactly a secret we hate him. Dumbledore will think we made it up to get him sacked. Filch wouldn't help us if his life depended on it. He's too friendly with Snape. And the more students get thrown out, the better, he'll think. And don't forget, we're not supposed to know anything about the stone or Fluffy. That'll take a lot of explaining." Hermione looked convinced, but Ron didn't. "If we just do a bit of poking around..." "No," said Harry flatly. "We've done enough poking around." He pulled a map of Jupiter towards him and started to learn the names of its moons. The following morning, notes were delivered to Harry, Hermione, and Neville at the breakfast table. They were all the same. "Your detention will take place at 11 o'clock tonight. Meet Mr. Filch in the entrance hall. Professor M. McGonagall." Harry had forgotten they still had detentions to do, in the furore of the points they'd lost. He half expected Hermione to complain that this was a whole night of revision lost, but she didn't say a word. Like Harry, she felt they deserved what they got. At 11 o'clock that night, they said goodbye to Ron in the common room and went down to the entrance hall with Neville. Filch was already there, and so was Malfoy. Harry had also forgotten that Malfoy had got detention too. "Follow me," said Filch, lighting a lamp and leading them outside. "I bet you'll think twice about breaking a school rule again, won't you, eh?" he continued, leering at them. "Oh, yes. Hard work and pain are the best teachers, if you ask me. It's just a pity they let the old punishments die out. Hang you by your wrists in the ceiling for a few days. I've got the chains still in my office. Keep 'em well oiled in case they're ever needed. Right, off we go. And don't think of running off now. It'll be worse for you if you do." They marched off across the dark grounds. Neville kept sniffling. Harry wondered what their punishment was going to be. It must be something really horrible, or Filch wouldn't be sounding so delighted. The moon was bright, but clouds scuttled across and kept throwing them into darkness. Ahead, Harry could see the lighted windows of Hagrid's hut. Then they heard a distant shout. "Is that you, Filch? Hurry up, I want to get started." Harry's heart rose. If they were going to be working with Hagrid, it wouldn't be so bad. His relief must have showed in his face, because Filch said, "I suppose you think you'll be enjoying yourself with that oaf? Well, think again, boy. It's into the forest you're going, and I'm much mistaken if you'll come out in one piece." At this, Neville let out a little moan, and Malfoy stopped dead in his tracks. "The forest?" he repeated. He didn't sound quite as cool as usual. "We can't go in there at night. There's all sorts of things in there. Werewolves, I heard." Neville clutched the sleeve of Harry's robe and made a choking noise. "That's your lookout, isn't it?" His voice cracking with glee. "Shouldn't have thought of them werewolves before you got into trouble, shouldn't you?" Hagrid came striding towards them out of the dark, Fang at his heel. He was carrying a large crossbow, and a quiver of arrows hung over his shoulder. "About time," he said. "Been waiting for you half an hour already. All right, Harry, Hermione?" "I shouldn't be too friendly to them, Hagrid," said Filch coldly. "They're here to be punished, after all." "That's why you're late, isn't it?" said Hagrid, frowning at Filch. "Been lecturing them, eh? It's not your place to do that. You've done your bit. I'll take over from here." "I'll be back at dawn," said Filch. "For what's left of them," he added nastily, and he turned back towards the castle, his lamp bobbing away in the darkness. Malfoy now turned to Hagrid. "I'm not going into that forest," he said, and Harry was pleased to hear the note of panic in his voice. "You are if you want to stay at Hogwarts," said Hagrid fiercely. "You done wrong, and now you got to pay for it." "But that's servant stuff. It's not for students to do. I thought we'd be writing lines or something. If my father knew I was doing this, he'd—" "Tell you that's how it is at Hogwarts," Hagrid growled. "Writing lines. What good's that to anyone? You do something useful, you'll get out. If you think your father'd rather you be expelled, then get back to the castle and pack. Go on." Malfoy didn't move. He looked at Hagrid furiously and then dropped his gaze. "Right then," said Hagrid. "Now, listen carefully." All right, that is where we're going to stop for now. We will learn what they have to do on their detention in the Forbidden Forest when we continue our chapter in the next video. But let's discuss what we have read so far. So, Harry and Hermione get caught by Filch. Who else catches someone in the hallways at night? Professor McGonagall caught Neville Longbottom. He was trying to warn Harry and Hermione that Draco was setting up a trap for them. Well, Professor McGonagall did not believe about the dragon, nor could they really tell her because Hagrid would have gotten into big trouble. So, Professor McGonagall said that they were trying to trick Draco in the first place, and sadly Neville got caught in it. Well, he didn't, but Harry and Hermione still felt really bad. What is their punishment? They lose 50 points for the house. So remember, all the houses, Slytherin, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, and Ravenclaw, get points for doing good things or when they win the Quidditch matches, and at the end of the year, they win the House Cup, whoever has the most points. Well, Neville, Hermione, and Harry all lost 50 points in one night. And that took them down a lot. Why were they being punished, though? Take a step back. They are not supposed to be out of their common room, out of their dormitory at night. It's not smart to be walking around at night anyway in a castle, but that is one of their rules, that they're not allowed to walk around at night. And that's a big rule to break. So what happened when they lost all of those points? They were the least popular people in Gryffindor, weren't they? A lot of people were really upset with them that they would break the rules so bad and lose the lead. Gryffindor was winning, and now they are last place. Ugh. But Harry overhears something when he is leaving the library. What does he overhear Quirrell saying? He says no, he doesn't want to do it, but then he gives in to whatever and whoever he was talking to. Harry thinks Snape might have snuck out the other door, but he didn't see anybody in that classroom. Does Harry do anything about it? No. He has sworn off meddling, is what he said. And so he doesn't want to lose any more points for his house. He's not going to meddle in things that he doesn't need to meddle in. Well, we'll see exactly how the rest of their detention goes in the Forbidden Forest in our next video when we finish up Chapter 15 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I hope you enjoyed this part so far, and we will see you all next time. Bye, everyone!